before I dive in, I'd love to know who is in the room with me. So if you could just introduce yourself really quick.
I'm Melissa.
Okay. Are you a freshman, sophomore?
I'm a freshman.
Okay,
yeah.
what are you studying?
Dietetics.
Okay,
yes,
very
but
cool.
I think I want to switch to DO.
Okay, okay, so like lots of school
Yes,
potentially.
but
okay.
they're like more wholesome, and I'm like a wholesome person, like with exercise, you know, like your habits and like counseling, and that's more of that job, more so like dietitian.
Okay, nice. Then
I'm Caitlin, and I am double major nursing and psychology.
how are you liking that?
It's busy, but it's good.
Yeah. What year are you?
I'm still finishing my career because I'm technically a sophomore.
Okay.
I came in, well,
You're like, that's a complicated question.
I came in with enough credits to be a sophomore, but it's my first year actually at ASU.
Got it.
I
Okay.
transfer credits from CBCC, so
Got it. How are you liking ASU so far?
I like it. I'm going to the Tempe campus for most of my classes right now,
Okay.
but I'm here for like 2 days a week, so I like it.
Nice. Are you liking psychology or nursing more, or do you like them equally?
They're different, but they kind of go hand in hand because they're both like, I mean, one's like medical, and one's like, I think medical. So they're kind of in the same sort of field together, which is nice. I like it.
That makes sense. Well, and they're both very people-centered in a lot of ways, so understanding how to treat people, whether it's mentally or physically or somewhere in between. So I can see how there's connection there, depending on what you want to do. Awesome. And then we have
Me, I'm Quinn, the program coordinator for the TRIO program. Now I know you're not a TRIO student, but just to let you know, the TRIO program is a grant-funded program by the Department of Education to support and help students that are first generation, students with high financial need, or students with disability on all the resources that ASU has and the opportunities, to help our students to progress on through the 4 years at ASU and finish up their bachelor's degree. So Melissa is one of our TRIO student here. But I appreciate you being here too, because really, this whole workshop, it's for any ASU student. You do not have to be a part of our TRIO program. And this is my first year in the TRIO program as a program coordinator too. So all these workshops, I'm very excited about because then I'm learning stuff too. So, and I have kind of a goal of my own to maybe someday do my own business. I actually have a coffee shop business with a cousin of mine that's in Berkeley. I'm a very, very silent partner. I just want to say that right now. I just go up there to eat and that's it. But eventually, to do some business and to kind of give back to the university. So this is one that I was really excited for too.
Yeah, so my name is Lauren Dunning. I work at ASU. I'm a program manager for the Office of Entrepreneurship and Innovation, which sounds very fancy. But my specific opportunity and program, like the work I do, is really supporting students while they're at the university and navigating the resources in ways that they can engage with different resources around this idea of entrepreneurship or innovation. And so I'll get into a few of what those resources are today as kind of a high-level 101. Here are some options of how to engage. But before getting into specifics of this is a program, this is an event you can go to, all those things, which I will do because I think that's always nice to have next steps. I really like to kind of level set what we talk about or what we mean when we say entrepreneurship. It's a big word. It took me a while to consistently type it correctly. So when I first started working in my office, I was like, I really need to get down where all these E's are placed and what's going on. But everyone has kind of opinions of what entrepreneurship is or what it looks like. And a lot of that is based on maybe pop culture relevance or maybe what you've seen with family or friends or whoever else. And that may be completely accurate in depictions, but we always like to have a pretty broad view of it. So before kind of saying what entrepreneurship means to me, which helps explain why I like the work that I do, I'd like to know from both of you, since it's fairly interactive, kind of what comes to mind, whether it's a specific person or type of thing. We already talked about maybe starting a business, whether it's a coffee shop or something else. Is there anything else that we think about when we think of entrepreneurship?
Shark Tank.
Shark Tank. Okay, awesome. Thank you for that.
It's a great show.
So raising money to do whatever I need to do that I maybe mortgaged my home 3 times for, depending on the panel and the students, right? Or the people presenting. So Shark Tank comes to mind. Anything else?
mine's just like the initial like starting your own business is what always comes to my mind. Is
Okay. Starting a business, pitching your idea. I think that's kind of the key concept of Shark Tank is there's a pitch presentation. You answer like a series of questions that can be really challenging. And depending on how well you do, you might have investment for whatever it is that you're trying to create and make happen. And then I know we had somebody else just join us, so I'm going to put you on the spot. And I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself really quickly and then say what you think of when you think of entrepreneurship. So we just kind of got started and that's our starting point.
Okay.
So.
Well, hi, I'm Tabitha. What I think of when I think of entrepreneurship is, I don't know, I think of just like a person wanting, like having the goal in mind to start their own business.
Awesome. So when you think of entrepreneurship, you think of the entrepreneur, whoever
Yeah.
that founder is that has that vision and brings it forward, right? All accurate, true things. So at ASU, we kind of talk a lot around this idea of having an entrepreneurial mindset, which means whether or not you ever start your own business, whether or not you are ever kind of a founder of a company, you have the ability to think as if you were an entrepreneur in different positions and opportunities, whether it's in an existing company or just how you pursue your own life. And when we look at the entrepreneurial mindset, there's kind of three things we talk about the most. So it's this idea of creativity, right? This idea of connection. So a lot of times it might be your idea, but you're connecting to other people and connecting to other resources to actually make it happen. And then it's this idea of creating value. So we call it the 3 C's, but the third one's really value-based. So any good business, if you think about it, whether it's the most current social media platform and what it provides, or a new store on your street, they all are creating some kind of value for their potential customer or user. Otherwise, they're not usually successful. So I think I joke with people sometimes about the one app that they have on their phone that they're like, probably no one else has this. I downloaded it. I never really used it, but it exists, so it's there, right? So there's always a goal when you're creating something to not be that one application in the phone that you're like, I'm not really sure how this happened, but that actually has a value or a purpose in some way, whether it's creating social connection and making you feel more informed with your network, or if it's actually doing sales of a product or a service or whatever else. All the time we're looking at creating something that has a value to someone else if we're going to be kind of a sustainable company. So if you think about entrepreneurship separate from a traditional hobby or like kind of craft-based thing, it can have all those same components, but the goal is that it's sustainable enough that it is kind of providing some level of customer ongoing relationship so that you can have that idea continue and not be something that you're just kind of doing on your own that has no one, having that value for them there. There's a difference between an artist that creates art for themselves versus an artist that has a gallery and actually is a living, working artist, right? So all that said, we really believe that entrepreneurship is relevant to students regardless of what they're studying. So whether or not you pursue psychology or nursing or dietetics or a DO, whether or not you have your own practice one day, whether or not you open your own kind of service or find a need for a new system or a new device or whatever that might be, there's this benefit of being able to be kind of thinking innovatively and looking at resources and mapping what makes sense for you, right? What was your major, by the way?
Here's medical studies.
Okay, cool. So medical preferences were still relevant. That's good. But looking at it, there's this kind of opportunity. And really, when we define entrepreneurship, or when I define entrepreneurship, most of the time I would say entrepreneurship is about pursuing an idea, whether it's a business or a venture or a nonprofit, whatever that is. It's pursuing an idea without clear resources already defined of how you're going to do this. So a lot of times when somebody is starting something, they're having to identify ways to make it happen that aren't always as clear as I have a job and they will pay me and I do this job and I'm successful in this position, right? And even if you go that route, there's still value of being able to pitch a new idea or maybe an improvement and to make sure that you're identifying resources that could make something happen in an existing existing system. So regardless, we think it's valuable. And with university students, which is where I focus a lot of my time, it's also just that ability to believe in the potential of your own ideas. So I think as a culture, we have some value towards entrepreneurship. We have a lot of examples of kind of the American dream and starting your own company and kind of doing that. And we have Shark Tank and we have all these things. But we also have a lot of reasons why we sometimes tell people not to risk something and say, you know, you want to play it safe, you want to be considerate of what's going on, and it might be easier in some ways to not pursue those ideas. But at ASU in particular, I think we have an environment that's rich with resources to help make it be something that you can really work through to see if you're testing whatever your ideas are, really thinking about whether or not there is a customer to make it sustainable and helping with a little bit of that risk, right? So it's not to say there won't be any risk, because there's risk in everything, but it is to say that we have some resources and opportunities available for you all that maybe make it a little bit easier to get started when you are working on something. Do you, any of you personally know somebody else that you would say is an entrepreneur? Yeah? What do they do?
My uncle, he started his own construction company.
Oh, wow.
And it was like a long process because he actually, like when he was younger, he started his company with his friends and it grew pretty big. But then he said something and he didn't agree with his friends, so they kicked him out. So then he ended up back to ground zero and then had to work his way up. So now he is buying, with his company, he is buying parts of different, Red Rhino,
Oh, wow.
an airplane, and he's buying out different things and is growing it that way. It's really cool. Yeah.
So you've seen maybe a real life example of somebody having to persevere, real specific co-founder struggles, which can be a challenge, but also having and identifying different strategies to make something work. So usually there's not one way to build a business, there's not one way to build a service. So figuring out how do you do this with your goal in mind and how does this make sense, right? And there's always, depending on the time of year, there's always a market for construction. So making sure that we're creating something that has those customers and that need, that is something that you can fill, versus maybe working in a space where everyone already has it covered, right? I think that you can be really innovative. I'll give an example. So I think there's an opportunity for people to be innovative in technology almost all the time. I think if you had calculators in high school, you probably all had a TI calculator, right? It's just a thing. So there's opportunities where people are saying, how do we figure out a different way to get a calculator in a classroom that meets the technology we already bring in the classroom now? So there's actually a former student or an alumni of ASU who's trying to figure out a way to securely lock down phones that it can have the interface of a calculator, but it also it uses your existing system, because your phone is already an investment you make, whereas those calculators were $100+. They weren't insubstantial, right? So they're trying to identify how to fix that, but they're also going up against a pretty strong system of everyone uses this one thing, right? And that can be good and bad. There are other examples of companies, if you think of the shared economy stuff, so Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, they were all going up against existing systems of how we said we would get a ride if we needed one, or how we would rent a place if we needed one. And when they first started out, there was a lot of resistance around this idea of, I would definitely let a stranger into my home and stay there for a night, or I would most certainly have somebody drive me that I'm using their personal car for, right? So you have to create systems in which maybe there's times where people are apprehensive, but there has to be a value enough of the system that already exists isn't ideal, so that's how we're able to find opportunities to disrupt it a little bit more, right? Okay, so I'm gonna advance my slides a bit and talk about some specific resources. Maybe, we'll see if I advance my slides. We'll see what I do next. All right. So how many of you knew that there was an Office for Entrepreneurship and Innovation at ASU? Yeah, okay, that's okay. So our office is actually located off campus altogether, and it's not usually a known thing. So hopefully a lot of the resources I talk about today will be all new information and super helpful, and you'll be glad you spent your lunch hour having this conversation. Oh, my slides went ahead of me. Okay. So with that, We have also within WP Carey, they have a Center for Entrepreneurship, and WP Carey is obviously the business school, and none of you were business students, but the Center for Entrepreneurship serves ASU students regardless of major. So they are kind of experts in a lot of things related to entrepreneurship. They have academic programs where you can actually study entrepreneurship, classes you can take as a non-entrepreneurship major that if you were wanting to test an idea and work on something, you can have a semester where that's actually your class is focused on creating and working through a business idea. But they also have resources like Founders Lab, which is a weekly newsletter that helps connect students to everything entrepreneurship happening across the university. And they're actually doing, in a couple of weeks, they're doing a tour to different startup companies in the Phoenix metro area where students can come for free, be part of a bus tour that day, connect directly with founders of different companies in the valley to hear their story. One of the stops is a lunch place, so there will also be lunch included, but they do kind of regular events and activities to help create community around this idea of entrepreneurship. So a lot of times if you are thinking about pursuing something or you're just interested in this, it can feel a little bit isolating as it relates to what most people are maybe doing or thinking of doing. So creating that community of other people figuring out similar problems or just kind of thinking through it is really helpful. And if you don't have an idea, you can still benefit from knowing what other events are going on and knowing, hearing those stories firsthand, have more examples of understanding how did somebody persevere through a hard time, how did somebody figure out how they were going to create something, how do they even get started, right? So whether or not this is your particular path, there's still some value in that inspiration story of that starting point. So Founders Lab is a great resource. So fancy. Doing this. And then we're actually going to be on campus again on Thursday. So every semester we do efforts to come on campus to make sure we're connecting students to information around resources. I will be doing, and colleagues of mine will be doing a much more abbreviated version of this conversation. So we might talk to one of your classes on Thursday, we might talk to 3. It depends on how many faculty said yes and how many times you see yes. But we'll be doing an open pitch event that night at 4 o'clock. We'll actually be in Changemaker upstairs in the same building, where any student can share an idea they're thinking of doing or actually working on, network with other students, get feedback. If we have 5 or more students pitch, which we usually do, whoever the crowd favorite is, which is determined by the audience, will actually get $250 to keep working on their idea. So 2 minutes of time, $250. I think it's a really good trade-off. Most everyone's going to hear about this on Thursday. It is Tuesday, so if you want to think of an idea and you're excited about this, you have 2 days of lead time to kind of figure something out, invite your friends, register to pitch, do all those things. So if any of you are kind of curious, we certainly recommend it. I think it's a really fun event. It's kind of like Shark Tank, except not stressful. And there's no judging panel in a formal way, so it's not like you have to have it all figured out. You can maybe answer questions informally, but it's really 2 minutes pitch. We don't do slide access, so it's literally you just speaking about your idea. We hosted this earlier this semester at the different campuses to give an idea of an idea a student came up with. We had a student pitch an idea that was essentially like suspenders for your socks, so a way to connect your sock to your shoe so that they never fall down for like the ankle sock, right? That might seem silly for some people, but if you're a runner or maybe you're focused on being really active, you could say, oh, I understand why this is a problem, but I love ankle socks and I love that like they give me these options, so I would totally want something to help secure that so I don't have to think about it, right? So that was an example of a pitch. It doesn't mean that you need to go now pitch sock suspenders in 2 days, but it's a range of ideas from everything from that to an app idea to actually opening a coffee shop. It can be anything that's kind of your own idea, and then we just say as long as it's in the general code of conduct. So if you know it's definitely illegal, maybe don't pitch that, but short of that, we're fine and we're open to your ideas. Cool? Okay, so I hope I'll see some of you on Thursday at 4. And even if you don't pitch, you can still help pick the favorite idea. And so when we talk about entrepreneurship, a lot of times we think of one person. We think of the entrepreneur having all the answers, figuring everything out, right? Like if I was going to say name a famous entrepreneur, name a famous entrepreneur, who is that? Who do you know? Come on, there's gotta be
Any of
some.
the Shark Tank.
Any of the Shark Tank judges?
Yeah.
Sure. Anyone else?
I remember. I don't remember her name, but the Spanx lady.
Yes, she's great. I do know her name. I can't think of it at the moment either, so I feel badly because I use her as an example a lot. A lot of times you think of one person, right? So it's very rare you think of a team of people. So you might say Mark Zuckerberg, you might say Elon Musk, you might say Bill Gates back in the day. Like usually it's one person. Very rarely does that one person have all the answers, and very rarely have they not had support along the way. And I think this is true of anything. When you have something you're thinking about wanting to do, a lot of times you might say, like, I know I want to do this, but I don't know how to get there. Like, I don't know how to start working on this. I'm not sure what my next steps are. Like, where do I even go with this? And that's where mentorship is so helpful. And at the university, we have 3 different types, which I think is nice. So the first is what we call Entrepreneurship Catalyst meetings, which is connecting with another student at the university who's more involved with entrepreneurship that can help you with kind of early stage feedback on whatever your idea is. So let's thinking about how to create an idea and how to test it and how to make it make sense for you. So you might have this particular idea, but you might not know that you need to think about who your customer is and what your target segments are and all these pieces. They can help you work through some of that and guide you to resources that help you on your own time kind of work through those ideas if you don't want to study it in the classroom. They also have the ability to kind of say, here are some resources specific to the university that you can take advantage of. Here's an event you can go to, here's a meeting you could attend, here's a person you should talk to that will help you advance your idea. So if you had a health idea focused on kind of innovating in the health space, I would be able to tell you that we have a new health innovation lab space on the first floor of Taylor Place, and that there's regular resources and faculty that are really excited about supporting student ideas around health innovation, right? These students would know that too. The other thing we have are what we call Entrepreneurship Experts, and they're referenced from, again, we talked about W.P. Carey's Center for Entrepreneurship earlier. They curate these expert people. An expert is literal, so they have specific topic areas that they're really skilled in. So maybe it's legal, maybe it's growth hacking, which if you don't know what that means, that's okay. I pick it because it's the least common language one. Maybe it's understanding the legality of the team you're wanting to form. So maybe you do have a friend that you want to work on something together, but you want to avoid what happened to your uncle, and you want to get in front of what does it look like for us to form a team, and what are the agreements we need to be making with each other to make this happen. There are a bunch of resources for those specific kinds of conversations, and you can make them by appointment, and while they're located on the Tempe campus, you can also do it by Skype or phone, so that's never a barrier if you can't make it to campus. And then we have what we call the Venture Doubles program, which gives you a dedicated venture mentor. So I'll talk about Venture Doubles more in a moment as a program as a whole, but a venture mentor would be someone that's actually assigned to meet with you on a regular basis. They are expert entrepreneurs that have usually kind of created and done this before. Maybe they've sold companies, maybe they've crashed and burned a couple of times, but they've figured out things along the way, and they're passionate about supporting ASU students and your ideas to help you navigate the realities of creating something. And they're also really passionate about giving you feedback that if you ever were on a Shark Tank type stage, you would be able to pitch and present what you're working on in a way that had value for the people that's your audience, right? So those venture mentors, it's not a one-time relationship, it's not like an appointment you make. You could work with them throughout the duration of the time that you were working on whatever that idea is. As long as you were wanting to kind of invest regularly, they're almost like a coach for you to give you feedback and direction as you do the actual work. So if there's something specific you want to work on, that's a really great platform to kind of not be the only one worrying about it, right? Or not hopefully engaging some of your friends, but then getting stuck because you all don't know the answer. And they don't know the answers either all the time, but they know the right kind of questions to ask to help guide you along the way. So the Venture Doubles program overall is kind of the signature program of how we support student entrepreneurship, as well as community and faculty entrepreneurs at the university. We have over 380 teams in this program right now that are working on creating different things. And we have the opportunity, the next deadline is October 4th. So if any of you are like, I have a really specific idea, I want to work on it, I want mentorship, I want access to funding, this is like the time to apply. But the program provides access to a few things. So it provides access to funding, which is a big thing for a lot of people, of saying, I have this thing I want to get started, but I don't have the resources to self-fund whatever it is I'm doing. And I need to be a bit further along before I can get significant investment, right? And what's nice about our funding is the majority is not investment. So it's award prizes, it's donated funding to support student ideas. So it's more common than not that you could get maybe $1,000 to work on your idea, that you wouldn't be giving away something of what you're working on to kind of participate and take that funding. We also have the mentoring that I already talked about, so that dedicated mentorship, which I think is the most critical piece. And then access to workspace for some of the programs. So sometimes you need a dedicated place to help kind of compartmentalize your life and actually work on what you want to work on. So these resources are all relevant. There are multiple times throughout the school year. So basically, if you ever are at a point when you have an idea and you want to work on it, apply for venture doubles. The deadline's never that far away, and it gives you that access to additional resources, including over $1.3 million, which is what ASU kind of invests or gives in a typical year to support entrepreneurship ideas at the university. Any questions about this? Interesting? Everyone knew about it already, right? Yeah. Okay. That's why we have these conversations. That's good.
And this is only for students, right? At undergrad or also
Any
grad?
level. So any level. There's some different rules around if you were maybe a graduate student working in a lab using faculty IP to like commercialize it, because then it's a little gray of what's your idea, what's the university's. But we still even support faculty entrepreneurs with that program. Ultimately, whether you're a student, a community member, a faculty member, you all need the same supports. You all need access to the mentorship and the expertise. You all need access to funding at different points, and you all might need access to workspace. So we don't treat it that differently, but the majority of people in those programs, it's actual students creating things right now. We actually had the state press attended our event, the open pitch we did last week on the Tempe campus. So if you're curious, it gives another example of an idea a student was working on, and they're part of the Venture Doubles program. So it gives a good overview of some of what's happening. So that was just posted, I think, a day or two ago. So I searched entrepreneurship and I found it, and I was like, oh, I'm quoted in that. I'm glad I read the article. But I think it gives good context for everyone else too. How many of you have heard of Changemakers Central? 2. Okay. So Changemakers Central is a space that is committed not only to entrepreneurship in some ways, but also to some broader goals. So I'll talk about it more generally first, and then I'm going to talk about the things that are most important to the ways I want to engage students with community around entrepreneurship. So Changemakers Central is a dedicated space on campus at each of the campus locations, but it's also a student-run initiative around kind of social impact. So they do a lot on volunteering, they do a lot of opportunities around actual storytelling and how do I tell my story for the most impact, whether it's about how I volunteer or how I engage. And then they also do a lot around social entrepreneurship. And when we say social entrepreneurship, there's a lot of times when somebody is creating something and they're not only focused on the goal of whatever they're creating, they're also maybe trying to make social impact or make the world kind of a better place with whatever it is they're doing. So an example of this, if you want to think in like kind of mainstream social entrepreneurship, if you're all familiar with like Tom's Shoes, right, or Warby Parker, those are profitable companies that have a very specific social investment of part of how they do their business. So Tom's, if you get that pair of shoes, is a pair of shoes, but you also know probably the brand promise that for every pair you purchase, a pair is donated in a developing country, right? So they're looking at multiple bottom lines, but it also distinguishes them from other companies, right? So we were talking about earlier, like how you always only want to buy things when they're on sale. I might feel less badly about spending $80 on a pair of shoes if I know that some of the profit is going to benefit someone else, right? So all things equal, it might be that the majority of times I won't pay more than whatever this dollar amount is, or it needs to be on sale, but like Tom's would be an exception for me because I like their brand and I like what they stand for, right? So that's an example of social entrepreneurship. There's also a lot more that are really focused, maybe they're nonprofit organizations, whatever else, they're really focused on that social impact, but they're wanting to do it in a sustainable way. So kind of figuring out, how do I make this project work on an ongoing basis? We have a student team that's had they've been on the front page of ASU's website a lot of times, called 33 Buckets. We actually did a local ad for them in the Super Bowl. Like, that's how much press they've gotten with what they've worked on. But they're working on kind of developing countries, how do you provide access to water and access to other resources? And they're doing it in a model that makes sense for everyone. So it really engages the community. So it's not like we build something and then we leave and no one knows how to use it. But they're also kind of going for this greater good goal of really providing a value for someone. So that's an example of a student team that might use Changemaker as a resource. Changemaker does different funding opportunities throughout the year. They also have an opportunity specifically for students in the TRIO program this year, that if you had something, it doesn't have to be specifically around entrepreneurship, but if you had an idea about social change, social impact, social action, you can apply for some funding to actually move that idea forward, as well as get some mentorship. So for those of you that are in the TRIO program, you'll hear more about that opportunity, I think, by email this week. The deadline for that is October 1st. But Changemaker does do some specific student-run events around entrepreneurship. They had what they call a solution summit last week, so it was a lot around how do we have solutions for big global programs or problems. In October, they'll do what they call the Startup Summit, and so Startup really being about entrepreneurship, and they're going to have different tracks, and it's going to be like a half-day conference that you can attend. Different sessions, they'll have a keynote speaker, they'll have a free lunch, they'll have a lot of ways to engage, but it's with this goal of connecting to mentorship and other resources, and that regardless of where you are, if you're maybe just kind of curious about what this looks like and you want to hear some speakers present, or if you're actively working on something, that this event is available for you regardless of where you are in that pathway. They usually get a few hundred students attending, and what's cool is it is run by other ASU students, so every year it looks a little bit different based on what the students think are most important for you all to know and have access to. Oh, that's so much easier. I realized I could have been using the arrow button this whole time. Smart. And then I'll say there's other ongoing resources and events that different colleges do. So Gen Labs is one example of that. They do a weekly or a bi-weekly event series that has a different founder speaker. And then we have access to actual resources. How many of you would say you like to make stuff? Like, you like to craft, you like to create things? What do you like to make?
I like to make any kind of crafts, like sewing or like posters or just like
anything.
Yeah.
So that's great. I have significant anxiety anytime somebody tells me to try to do something remotely artistic. But other people are like, no, it's so relaxing and it's so great, and then you've made something and you feel more pride in it. I get it in theory. In practice, I don't know if I'm that person. But we have a resource available to any ASU student who does actually like to make things, or you want to learn how to make things. So Tech Shop is located in Chandler. It has over $1 million of tools that you can use, including a sewing room. So if you were like, I want to make a specific quilt, I want to do these things that I can't do with the resources I have, ASU actually pays for memberships for ASU students to use that resource so that you can create the things you're interested in making. And they have everything from sewing machines, which I think it's pretty obvious what you can do with that, to options where you can do printing on t-shirts, to 3D laser printers, and this really loud water cutting machine that I don't think I'll ever know what you make with it, to welding stuff. They have a bunch of resources, and they ask you to be trained before you use all their equipment, which makes sense for everyone's safety and best interest. But ASU also has a $200 voucher per student to help you get started on being trained to be able to use some of those resources. So if any of you are actually wanting to make something, take full advantage of the fact that this is usually a few $100 monthly membership that we give to students to help you have resources to more stuff to kind of make whatever it is you want to create. And there's some cool people that hang out there in that space, both in the community and among ASU students. And I think you all know this. I need to update this slide because we're now 3 years in a row with it, right? But part of why ASU is such an innovative place, I believe, is that we have a lot of people doing innovative things, and that includes our students. So if you are thinking about working on something or interested in getting more connected, like, we just definitely encourage that along the way. Good? Questions? I know that was a lot of information. So imagine now if you have classes Thursday, you might hear an 8-minute version of what I just told you.
So like, compared to this campus, where is like the location of
our office?
Yeah.
So my office is actually located at ASU Strysong facility, which is off campus altogether. So we're located in South Scottsdale, but my role and other people, like the Venture Doubles program, we provide support to any student regardless of where they are. So we're kind of like our island in some ways. But what's great about that is the things like the mentorship, the access to funding, a lot of it doesn't require a physical space, or you can determine where you would want to meet with your mentor. So it might be that, and we do have mentors that can meet you downtown or work on things with you there too. So if you are wanting to get more involved in that program, there's resources to do that. But that's part of why every semester we come to campus, is because we understand like having a physical location on campus can be helpful. There are two, I think, if you want just places to go, there are two I always recommend for downtown. Well, now there are two. There used to be one. So Changemakers Central, which is upstairs, I think is a good place to get connected. The other one is a new space we have on the bottom of Taylor Place. It's called the Heal Lab. They literally rebranded it and opened it unofficially like a week or two ago. But that is focused on health innovation, like I talked about earlier. So it used to be kind of a kitchen research space that essentially was never used. So we said, you know, we have a lot of students passionate about health on this campus. We have a lot of interest in innovation. Like, let's create a space for there to be events and activities and things around the combination of the two. So the Heal Lab is now on the base of Taylor Place, kind of in the middle. And that's a space, it's open most of the time. They have a few hours on Thursdays. They're closed because they have a food pantry they help operate. But they're going to be doing a series of speaker events in the upcoming weeks too that are really focused on health innovation. So other founders, other stories around that idea of combining innovation with a health focus. So there'll be more events there, but there's also resources. Raquel in particular is a faculty member within the College of Nursing and Health Innovation that's really focused on supporting student ideas and like student interest in health innovation and what that can look like. And he has some direct experience himself too, so it's always interesting to ask. But those would be the two places I recommend. Our office is cool, but it's a work office. You know, it's not as exciting as a campus. So, any other questions?
And for those of you who don't know where Skysong is, so if you guys have been to the Tempe area and the Tempe Marketplace, the shopping mall, it's kind of across the freeway on the other end heading towards Scottsdale, and you see the white,
we have a
decorative,
very distinctive sail shade structure. That if you like,
you cannot miss it.
You would know it based on that. But it kind of, we also provide resources on campus. So a lot of the mentorship I mentioned earlier, including the Entrepreneurship Catalyst, we try to have those on campus as resources because we understand not everyone, I mean, we're in Arizona, people travel a lot, but not everyone has the time to travel all the time for the conversations they want to have. Any other questions? Was it all stuff you felt like you already knew? Okay, that's good.
Well, in particular, the resources.
Right.
Like, that's really cool that
Thanks.
you know, that we have that, especially the one that you're just showing about Chandler.
Tech shop.
Yeah, and free to students. I forget I'm a student too, but I'm a grad student, but I'll be done by the end of this month. So
You might have just missed that.
Yeah.
You think of all the things you could have been making when you were
Right?
trying to avoid
I could
writing.
be wealthy by now.
Do you all know what Square is? So it's that card reader that they use to like take your credit card information more mobile. So the components of Square and the first version of it, so we call them prototypes, the first like not fancy version of what they created, all of that technology and like the interface that they did all of that in a tech shop space. So that company kind of got started having access to these types of tools that they probably wouldn't have been able to make their first version of what they're working on had they been relying on stuff that they just owned themselves. And then clearly they probably don't use tech shop anymore, but it's an example of where people get started sometimes and why those resources are helpful to leverage. Well, I hope today's conversation was good. I know it was a lot of me talking. Does anyone have something they're maybe thinking about doing or they're curious about or interested in or just have like an idea they've always had but they're not going to go anywhere with and that's okay? Or you're just kind of generally curious? Like I have a friend, she's one of my best friends. She probably wouldn't appreciate this. I have a friend who thinks about ideas probably every other week. She'd be like, I thought of this thing, it needs to happen. And then like a year or two later, she'll see something similar to it on the news and she'll be like, that was my idea. And I'm like, well, we all have ideas, but like you have to actually do something for it to be like properly yours at a certain point. Like I'm pretty sure they have, you know, some legality of them owning this at this point too. But like she'd be like, oh, you know, the shoes with the removable heels, so when you're tired from walking with your heels, you can walk yourself. And then she'd like send me a commercial and be like, somebody did it, right? And so I think there's a lot of people that have those ideas, and sometimes they're like, yeah, I have the ideas and that's fun, but I don't want to do anything with it. Or there's the opposite, where it's like, maybe I'm not the idea person, but I'll help you figure out how to make it happen if you have something that has enough value, right? And there's nothing wrong with either. It's just figuring out who you can be in a system or in a team or whatever else to kind of move things forward if you are wanting to create something new.